Dr. Gina, welcome to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation. And I took the quiz on your website last night, the How Frazzlebrained Are You quiz. And turns out I got a 7 out of 10, which I was
Oh,
surprised and also not very surprised. But it was said severe frazzle brain. And I'm like, oh no. And I've been reading your book. And so I know a lot of the techniques that you recommend in there. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense though. And I would say too, it depends on the day. My husband happens to be out of town this week. And so I've got lots of plates spinning in the air and balls in the air. So I want to start off really with that word, frazzle brain, and tell us what it is. And for some of us who might be like me, severe frazzle brained, what we can be expecting to see in our lives.
well, that word frazzled, right, has to do with feeling a lot of stress, right? Sometimes we're overcommitted, sometimes we're under time pressure. But frazzle brain is really a mixture of irritability, feeling a lot of pressure, like you've got a lot on your plate, a lot to do, some time crunch, get the kids to school on time, all that stuff. But there's also a little fatigue built in there because sometimes we're just feeling like we're not getting to rest and pause. And so it is really a neuropsychological process. It's psychophysiological. So it affects our body, our energy, how our hormones are metabolized, how we metabolize our food, our gut functioning is impacted. So a lot of us can have frazzled moments in our day, like there might have been a frazzled moment when you took the How Frazzled Are You quiz, but then we kind of find a place to land and rest and recuperate and so forth. Bodies are built for that. Our bodies are built to go through periods of stress and then recover. But in modern life, people skip over the recovery part and take their Red Bulls and their energy drinks and their coffees and their, stimulants and then, have some alcohol at the end of the day to wind down. And then we're chronically stressed, chronically frazzled. And this is where things can start to break down in our bodies and in our relationships and in our lives. So that's really what we want to address is making stress management a daily practice.
This is great. And you mentioned a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms, many of which I used to partake in, most of which I do not anymore. I love that you're putting the emphasis on recovery because that gives us permission to have this, you know, day that's full of responsibilities and obligations and even things that we love to do. But that also, like, the important part is how are we recovering? That helps me so much put it into context. So, we know the unhealthy coping skills, a lot of them. What about some healthy coping skills for those of us at the end of the day who really just need to set it down, let it go, and then move on to the nighttime and the next day feeling reset?
Right. And I think with kids, it's hard because you have the little ones, depending on what their age is, and you've got to get them ready for bed. I do think it helps for a family to have regular bedtimes and then a period of time after the children are in bed where you can decompress, where you can really relax, you can rest, and you can recover. I do think it's important to think about how you want to feel at the end of the day. And when you rest, sometimes I think people will just be exhausted and they'll turn on something on the TV. And the TV is a negative hypnotic. Within about 45 seconds, you're in a hypnotic state. And whatever images you're seeing, whatever stories you're watching are going right into your emotional brain. And if you're watching trauma and violence and conflict, which most interesting dramas on television are all of the above,
Not to mention the news.
the news, I definitely recommend people subscribe to a newspaper and not watch television news because it's designed to alarm you and arouse you and get you all worked up so you'll buy soap or whatever it is they're selling. So we know what it does to the brain to be doom scrolling on your phone, to be watching television news and seeing, war scenes and, people grieving and crying all over the world and conflict and that does not help us have the feeling state we want to have as we're trying to let go of the day and get in a more restful, recuperative state of mind so that we can go to sleep. So I think it's really important to be intentional about how do you want to feel. So you might enjoy a cup of herbal tea in, your backyard watching the birds or listening to birds or whatever rather than watching a television program. But if you want to laugh, there's comedy, watch something funny or read something that's relaxing or look at a magazine or sometimes just close your eyes and allow yourself to listen to some soothing music. But I think people don't intentionally think about how do I want to feel right now and what input am I putting into my brain? What is the emotional consequence of that? A lot of times we're just mindless, and then we find ourselves feeling all agitated before bed because we just saw some, really agitating thing on television. So I recommend being really intentional about it. Also, there's just a lot of research now on keeping the screens out of the bedroom. If you're watching TV in your bed and you're going to be getting a lot of negative, arousing, distressing things going right into your brain when you're trying to let go of the day and really be at peace and get good rest. So it's best to not have them in your bedroom. Put them somewhere else. About an hour before bed, turn off all your screens, read a book, look at a magazine, putter around, get ready for bed, wind
Yeah.
down, slow yourself down.
Yeah.
And that really can make a difference. I've seen people who had really difficult sleep issues once they got in the habit of turning off the TV an hour before bed and finding something restful. Sometimes people like to listen to audible books or mellow music. Sometimes people like to draw and sketch things, something relaxing that you end up finding that you feel a lot better the next day and you sleep better.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of people are addicted to stress? Because the first thing, like when you're saying all this, I'm like, yes, like I'm early bedtime for me. Our kids go to bed aggressively early because I know how important sleep is for them. Plus, they take a long time to wind down. So they go to bed very early. My husband and I have our adult time. We try to instill like a 2 or 3 day a week thing where we only watch TV on 2 or 3 days a week. The other time we're reading, talking, connecting. So I'm like, yes, 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 yes. A former version of me, though, and I feel like some people with us here today are like, nope, that won't work for me. Like, do you think we might be addicted to stress? No judgment here. And if so, what might be the antidote to that?
I think that is really a good description of the driven, make the most out of every moment of everyday corporate cultures that we live in now, where we prioritize efficiency and productivity over our relationships. And that isn't good for our mental or physical health, but it is really encouraged. It is encouraged in our get everything quickly done, get the information quickly, don't go deeply into anything, go, go, go until you drop. Um, and that is culturally reinforced and encouraged. And so then our nervous systems can't tolerate boredom, can't tolerate things being slow. I was in Hawaii with my husband, Kauai, last year. It's our favorite Hawaiian island. And everybody was friendly in the market, in the supermarket. And we were in line for the checkout counter. And this woman comes in and just is so wound up and yelling at people for, why are you waiting in the hallway? Why are you moving so slow? Literally said to me, get out of my way. And we all looked at each other and someone said she needs to get into the aloha spirit. But seeing everything as a race and everybody as an obstacle to your objective, being unable to tolerate waiting for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. That is a person whose nervous system arousal is really, really, everything is urgent. So, but I think people live on that everything is urgent timeline, and they pay a price for it. There's studies done on the most competitive lawyers and the most competitive doctors in medical school, the people with what we call type A personalities that are highly competitive, aggressive, have to be on top, have to be first, have to be the fastest, that those people died at a much higher rate of coronary artery disease. So they get to the finish line of life a lot faster too. Right? So it's not a healthy way to live. But you're right. You can feel like you can become, I guess, addicted to that sense that I made the most out of every moment of every day. And anybody who's in my way isn't, an obstacle, and I'm going to be angry and irritable and frazzled. But you're going to get to the finish line of life faster than everybody else. And also, you won't be able to tolerate boredom. And you'll also miss a lot of things. You won't see what's right in front of you a lot of times. You're only seeing your objective. And so you're not going to be as effective in life. It's also going to impact your relationships with others significantly. We were just recently in Mexico, and San Miguel de Allende, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site in central Mexico, in the highlands of Mexico. The editor of the Mexico News Daily, it's the largest English language Mexico news source in Mexico. He gave a lecture and talked about what he and his wife learned when they moved to Mexico, is that people value relationships over efficiency. And they value collective art, and they have town squares where people interact with one another. They value relationships over getting the job done. So when a waiter comes and talks to you, they want to kind of get to know you a little bit. You might not get served as quickly as you do in America, but it's a more relaxed experience eating in Mexico. But what you notice is that some of these countries where they value relationships over being fast and efficient, they're happier. They rate much higher than Americans do on happiness. So if your goal is to feel better and happier and to be healthier, you do need to be able to slow down and tolerate some boredom. And at first, when people are trying to learn to reduce their anxiety and reduce their stress, reduce their frazzle brain, they find themselves really bored. Like, I can't just stand in a checkout line at a grocery store and just be and look around. I have to be on my phone getting business done. I have to be getting back to people. But what you will find is that your nervous system will be able to take a little break in the grocery store line, and you might have a nice friendly chat with the person waiting behind you, and you might notice something you didn't notice before. You might actually even notice what's going on in your own nervous system and be able to make minor adjustments in your posture to make yourself feel better. So all of those things are important, but they require the ability to pause and slow down.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is that this is not just we're deciding to calm down. This is we're deciding and we're not requiring anything from our brain or our body to be doing. It's more of a being or a receptive state. Is that like the integration of like the mind and body is what I'm getting at here? Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, it is very much, because there is this interaction between we act like our brain is separate from our body, but it isn't. So, and we do know from lots of studies that our thoughts affect our physiology. So a lot of folks who are very driven ignore their body. We take stimulants to keep going and ignore our physical symptoms because we want to achieve some kind of accomplishment, or objective. And so that disconnect between the mind and the body leads to physical neglect and some physical symptoms that people get eventually. And we know the gut produces 90 something percent of our serotonin, which is our natural antidepressant. And the gut has its own brain. So if we're racing really fast, taking a lot of caffeine, our gut is going to be disrupted. And so our ability to produce neurochemicals that are going to help us feel happy and healthy and motivated, they get depleted. And dopamine, of course, is the motivating neurochemical. And if we are constantly pushing that dopamine with drive, 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 take some caffeine, get going, we can get a dopamine trough where we're feeling a lot of depressing symptoms and then we need more intensity, right? So that's just how people can get hooked on drugs too, and hooked on video games, and hooked on things that give you a big rush, things that are dangerous, needing higher and higher levels of stimulation in order to feel something. So that's because the brain and body are connected. On the other hand, we can make ourselves feel happier just by imagining things that make us feel happy. We can imagine ourselves feeling calm. Like I can imagine myself on the beach in Kauai and swimming with the fishes and, and I can feel some happiness there. I can grab a piece of that comfort and that joy and that relaxation just from thinking about it and imagining it. So I think, again, back to that idea of recovery, how do you recover from these frazzled moments in life where you are racing through the day and you have big obligations? How do you recover? You go back in your imagination to things that help you feel calm and relaxed. And sometimes that could be in the checkout line. You can be imagining yourself feeling really relaxed and taking deep breaths and not in a hurry. Takes as long as it takes to get through the market. Everything's going to be fine. I don't need to rush.
Your brain can be such an ally, is what I'm hearing you say. We have the power of imagination. We have the power of calling in a feeling just by closing our eyes and imagining that thing. I mean, that's magic, right? Like that's just so cool. And your book, Frazzlebrain, Break Free from Anxiety, Anger, and Stress Using Advanced Discoveries in Neuropsychology, it really is holistic in nature and it really is also science rich. But I love the way that you make it approachable for those of us who are not PhDs or scientists. And you really put it into terms and examples that we can find very relatable. So, why this book? Like, why is this the hill you want to die on, so to speak? Those are my words, not yours.
The book came about because frazzled, I mean, during the pandemic, and, that was what everyone was feeling. And that is still what we hear all the time. As a therapist, I just hear that word all the time. And I recommend, as a therapist, a lot of self-help books to my clients because a lot of clients get help from certain books, that workbooks and things like that. So I would recommend books on anxiety, and people would say to me, I can't get through it. It just makes me anxious to read it. And it's because a lot of the books start with these checklists of anxiety symptoms, gets you thinking about how you're feeling, and that makes it feel very amplified when you really start looking at, these diagnostic categories, and it starts really stressing people out. And then the remedies don't come until like chapter 7, and people don't want
You're
to
like,
wait through.
just give me the
Just give
solution.
me some solution. So I
Yeah.
thought there was a real need for a book that calmed you down while you read it. So one person referred to it as a MEXT book, a meditative textbook. So it's supposed to help you feel in every chapter. There's something to help you feel better in every chapter, so that it doesn't shy away from talking about trauma or hard things that can frazzle us and make us feel bad, but it offers you something to relax you and calm you down and make you feel better as you're going through it. So that was my intention, and that's been the feedback I've gotten from readers. They've really, really appreciated that it is science-based, but it doesn't overwhelm you with a lot of scientific jargon, and there are stories in it that people find relatable. And then there are these small little exercises that are really easy to do on the fly that turn your mind in the direction of calm as opposed to frazzle brain.
Yeah. What is happening in our brains and maybe even our bodies when we are relaxing, because I'm understanding that a big part of this process is to actually rest, relax, and recharge. And so, what's happening with us when we are resting?
This is a great question. And really, it depends on the different kinds of rest. If you are a person who meditates and you practice meditation like mindfulness meditation, transcendental meditation, Buddhist meditation, most religions have some sort of meditative practice. And there are different neurophysiological states that are unique to meditative rest and relaxation. Meditative rest is a combination of alertness, being aware, being awake and aware, and being very, very calm so that you can measure that calm with very slow heart rate and slow respiratory rate. So you're slowed down almost to like a sleep state, but you're alert and awake. So that's a very unique kind of state of relaxation. You can just start to relax yourself with deep breathing exercises by inhaling deeply through your nose, holding your breath for a few seconds, and then breathing out through your mouth for a few seconds. You're going to lower your heart rate. And when you slow your breathing down, you're telling your brain, everything's okay. Everything's okay. I don't need to be breathing fast right now. There's nothing urgent happening right now. We can produce the opposite state by hyperventilating. If you gasp, I don't want anybody to do this, but just believe me, if you do this, you can create a feeling almost of panic by gasping for breath with an open mouth over and over again. Your heart rate's going to start to go up and your brain's going to start to think something's wrong.
Even just you doing that, I'm like, what? What's going on? Right? That like
Right.
those mirror neurons had me being like, what?
It's
What's the
really
emergency?
fast.
Yeah.
So you want to inhale through your nose. We do a 6 by 6 by 6, we call it, or soothe breathing. You inhale through your nose for 6 counts, hold your breath for 6 counts, and exhale through your mouth for 6 counts, like you're exhaling through a straw. You can do that in the middle of an intense meeting and nobody knows you're doing it. If you're having to do a performance of some sort, slow your breathing down. And when you do that, your brain gets the message immediately that, I'm okay. I'm okay. And you'll lower your heart rate and lower your nervous system arousal. The other thing physiologically going on is cortisol levels. Now, cortisol tends to peak in the morning, gives us energy. Cortisol is also known as the stress chemical. So massive amounts of cortisol can lead to inflammation in the body. Chronic inflammation can lead to disease. So that's why we don't want to be chronically stressed. We want to aim for recovery. Once we've been stressed, we want to do some recovery things to calm the body back down. So breathing is one of the fastest ways we can do that. So you're driving down the roads, almost runs you off the road. You freak out. Heart rate goes up. You think, oh my God, I'm almost died, pull over to the side of the road, do some deep breathing. Tell yourself, I'm okay. Restore your heart rate back to normal. You'll be fine. It won't cause any long-term harm. You had an experience, a close call. It was scary. But if you're not restoring your heart rate back to normal and you're telling yourself, I almost died, I almost died, I almost died. Oh my God, this is terrible. And you stay in that state over a long period of time. And then the next day you can't get in the car. And then the next day you're afraid to drive to work. And, you're staying in that image of I almost died. Now we're stuck. And we need some help to get unstuck.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think many of us go through seasons where we're stuck. It's funny because I got a 7 out of 10 on that quiz last night. And then as we've been talking, I thought, okay, well, if I took that quiz right now, what would my score be? And I have a feeling it would, I don't remember exactly, but I have a feeling it would be more like a 3 out of a 10, which is like, okay, that's a big improvement. And that's what you're saying is like, it is cyclical. Like we are cyclical beings. You wake up in the morning and the cortisol spikes and we got to get stuff done. And then our day plateaus in the middle. And then at the end, we wind down. And I happened to take that quiz last night, right after bedtime routine with my kids, right as I was preparing my day for today, because I knew I didn't have much buffer time in the morning because my husband was out of town and I had a yoga class and I knew that, and I had to pack the lunches, right? So all of these things were going on at once. And it's like, okay, Of course, I got a 7 out of 10. I was sitting down to do this during a stressful time. And I think this is such a beautiful illustration for everybody here right now, in that it's permission to wax and wane. It's permission to not always be the most zen person in the room, because that's not the human experience, right? We're living the human experience, which is ebbs and flows. And that's how the day goes. And so I'm happy to report that I think I'm more of a 3 out of 10 now. So yay for that.
You seem like it. You seem like you're in a good place.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And this is one of the things I do that lights me up. And this actually, believe it or not, is part of my self-care routine, is having these conversations, because it fuels that inner curiosity I have. It serves others. It's connecting, right? So, and I've deduced that over a number of different years of those things that really do light me up and recharge me. And so this is an invitation to figure out what those things for you, the listener, are, that really, really get you into the zone and recharge you and feel good, because life is going to life, right? And I'm curious for you, Dr. Gina, how do you think this work that we've talked about changes families and systems and communities and maybe even the world?
It really is something that can change the world if people aim towards self-care on a daily basis and reducing anxiety and stress. So much of the problems in interpersonal relationships, the problems in the world, are people overreacting out of anxiety, fear, stress, to triggers and not pausing, not thinking, not making an intentional act. I remember seeing this video of a multi-car accident. It was one of those probably drone videos, and a motorcyclist kicked the side door of a car on the freeway. He just stupid move, but he obviously got mad at the car driver for about something, and he kicked the side of the driver's door, which probably scared the driver enormously. But what the driver did, instead of making a small correction to move away from the motorcyclist, he went 4 lanes across and caused a multi-car pileup, which obviously was triggered by the motorcycle rider. But sometimes when we can't regulate our own nervous system, we overcorrect, we overreact, without thinking. And I think we can overreact, and it's because we see people as we are, not as they are. So if I'm really stressed and frazzled, it's an example I use in my book. I have a neighbor who's very talkative, very kind, very interesting. But if I'm frazzled trying to get the groceries in, from the garage, and my neighbor decides she wants to have a long conversation with me, I'm really irritated. I'm like, sorry, can't talk right now. But if I'm out for a hike and I'm walking in the neighborhood, and I just love talking to her. She's really interesting. So same person, but my emotional reaction to her is all dependent on how I'm feeling. And how I'm seeing her is all dependent on my nervous system arousal in that moment. And this is true for everyone. We see people as we are. So if we're always ramped up, like that lady in Hawaii that was like, get out of my way, she couldn't walk 3 steps around me, to go around me. Everything bothered her. Everything was bothering her. So she was in a heightened state of arousal. So that's how people are, and that's how world leaders are. That's how, if people can get I don't use the word control, but if people can be intentional about their own nervous system arousal and be aware, self-aware, we make better decisions. Our relationships are better. We're less likely to overreact to things that irritate us or scare us. We're better able to respond to an emergency effectively. So it really improves everything. And that has a ripple effect too. They've even looked at if you can get 2% of a prison population to meditate, at 2% of people who have calmed their nervous systems down, it reduces violence. It reduces all kinds of problems in the entire prison. So just being one of those people who is making an effort to make the world a better place, like you're trying to do here with your podcast and whatever other activities you're doing, raising healthy children, just doing that really does have a positive effect on the world. And in ways we don't know it. I'm always surprised when I hear about somebody saying, 3 years ago, I heard a lecture you gave, and And it really changed my life, and I'm like, "Wow," I had no idea. I had no idea. And I've been impacted enormously by, really good writers and people like yourself who are doing these incredible podcasts and really reaching a wide audience with a positive message about how they can feel better, and in doing so, you help others feel better without even trying sometimes.
Yeah. Amazing. It's brilliant. We see people as we are. Dr. Gina, your work is fantastic. Your website, frazzlebrain.com, is rich with resources, and your book, of course. And just thank you so much for being here and for the work you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan. It's been fun talking with you, and I just love the mission of your podcast.